Welcome to Sleek Notes E-commerce Boost podcast, your chance to learn from the e-commerce experts so you can boost your business.
Hey all! In this episode, the Director of Marketing at PlayStation in the Nordics, Steen Litrup, tells you everything he knows about influencer marketing, and he shares how you can make your influencer marketing work for your business. It's different, it's cool, and it's super useful for e-commerce. Let's go. All right, Peter. So thank you very much for joining the show. If you could just start out by introducing yourself, that would be amazing.
No problem. So my name is Steen Litrup. I'm the marketing director of PlayStation, Nordics and the Baltics, where we distribute, market, and sell PlayStation consoles like the PlayStation 4, but also new innovation products like the PlayStation VR headset. And lastly, we do sell and market software titles like Uncharted, Gran Turismo, or Call of Duty.
Cool. So this interview is going to be all about influencer marketing. So if you could just tell me a bit about what your experience with influencer marketing is.
So there are many gains from working with influencer marketing. I would say here in Nordics, we have generally a very strong and well-developed influencer landscape. Overall, you could say that many younger consumers or segments are no longer seeking news from traditional media, but instead they really consume a lot of content online. They really follow and trust influencers posting communication on their own channels and also on their own premise, which is far more effective than traditional marketing, you could say. So during the last year, we've really been focusing a lot on working with influencers, as we firmly believe that this is a shortcut to really create some credible content and communication around our brand and products that ultimately will, of course, make us more attractive and hence increase our sell-through. So overall, we really believe this will support our business objectives by creating some awareness and engagement, and not only in your core audiences, but also in the less engaged segments. So we really see influencer marketing as an investment for the long run. So we really want to build long-lasting, long-term relationships where they eventually will be an integral part of any PR marketing plan.
Great. Do you maybe just have an example of a successful influencer project you've done?
Yes, I can do that. I would say we recently did influencer project around the launch of FIFA 18, which is a very known software title, together with the PlayStation 4, where we did send out some influencer kits with games and merchandise around the PlayStation. So we got a huge reach. We are talking millions of views. And we got a lot of positive mentions, and not least, we really from that, we got a lot of effective and engaging content, which we can still use, and that we are harvesting from. So what was important for us was really not only talking to the influencers, but equally important to all the followers of the influencers to make them have an interest in the PlayStation platform.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's pretend I own an e-commerce store and I want to get started on working with influencers. Where would you suggest I started?
So you could say the sort of a modern influencer or the modern consumer, they arrive on many different platforms within social. So your task is naturally then to find them. And as with anything else, you really need to start by defining what's the purpose and objective. So what do you want to achieve? It's sort of awareness, is it conversion, retention, and so forth. So this will sort of help you predefine the mapping process and which influences that are then subsequently relevant to your campaign or your concrete activity or your brand or platform. So it's really important that you find that, start really doing a proper mapping in the beginning. So what you concretely would do with in this sort of startup process, it's important that you really start by checking the quality of the influencer's content. How is their tone of voice? What content do they usually make? And is that, again, something that matches or talks against your brand values? So there's sort of kind of an interlink between, or the perfect match is really found between the influencer themselves, of course, the audiences that the following base they have, and your brands.
Sure, but where do I look for them? Do you have any? Because I'm thinking, is there like a database full of influencers, or where do I find them?
Yeah, so how we're working with influencers, we've sort of segmented them into three different groups, which ultimately talks against also what kind of approach you should have. So the first group is what we call MCNs, or multi-channel networks. So they're like sort of organized networks like Gonzo, Spray, Nordic Screens, etc. So those are sort of networks which manage influencers on contracts. So they operate sort of cross-channel, and they often have a high reach. We sort of describe this group as sort of work for hire, where you have to pay for the content. And also, of course, it often has sort of a limited period of time. So the next group is a bit similar, but that's sort of what we call the influencer marketing agencies, or even digital content agencies, which are specialized in activating influencers. So this group, again, is often used on project basis. Again, paid for content, again, often with high production value and quality. And you have, in that aim, you have more control of the outcome, both in regards to the actual content, but also then, of course, how you see it. So the last group, and probably the one that I would say would be the most interesting to at least get started with, is what we call direct influencers. That refers to the fact that this group is kind of a group of influencers that we want to have a direct relationship with. So this group often works independently. It's really about building this, as I talked about in the beginning, this long-term and mutual relationship. It might not necessarily be what you would call the tier one influencers, but instead it's really consumers or people that are naturally interested in your brand or your product. So again, this is really about being authentic, genuine, and here you really gain from mostly non-paid content, where you as a brand need to give away a bit of your control. You really need to hand over the keys, which can be a bit terrifying for many corporate brands or companies. The good thing is those people are also often quite easy to find. A good place to look for them would be your sort of most common social channels like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat even. And the reason I'm saying it could be easier to find them is that you probably already do receive attention or indications from this group on your channels that they has an interest or desire for your brand or your product. So what I would do is let's start reaching out to them, appreciating some of the work they've already done, and saying if they like your product, if they would be interested in having a dialogue around a sort of a mutual partnership.
So now you know what to do when you're looking for influencers to hire. Here's Peter on what warning signs there might be so you avoid an affiliate disaster.
Yeah, and as I said, I think in that context, it's really important that you look at the content they've already created. Is that something that you, as a brand or product owner, see matches your values? Secondly, do a bit of research about the followers they have. Again, are they sort of the people that you look after, or do you want to get in contact with? And lastly, I would say the tone of voice, the expressions, how they kind of talks about products and other related content pieces. So really do a proper research, because that really pays off. And then ultimately, I would say encourage to meet up with the influencers if possible. At least have a talk with them over the phone, because sort of a face-to-face or a dialogue will often tell if there's sort of a mutual proper interest from both sides.
Yeah, great. Makes sense, Chris. So you would suggest to send them an email and then suggest a meeting either over the phone or in person, and then discuss the relationship further.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that you actually, and they get to understand that this is, if we talk about this direct influences, often a sort of a non-paid or non-transactional based relationship, but that is a sort of a co-creating things where both parties actually benefit of their combined efforts. And I think it's really important that you do reach out and sort of start building an actual relationship for several reasons. One is, of course, that influencers or people in general tend to lose focus on what you've been discussing if you're not regularly in contact. So they might be excited one day about an idea, and then they move on to something else the next day. And secondly, it's important to stay relevant and present in their lives, at least to some degree, in order to understand what's really driving them, make sure they have what they need for them to be able to create this great content, and really showing interest, I think, is the key word here. And lastly, I would say keeping in touch also gives the influencers a sort of sense of importance to you. And I said it can be in many ways and forms. It can be meetings, phone calls, emails, social media outreach. But I think also the personal face-to-face meeting is really still a strong factor.
Brilliant, brilliant. So let's say my e-commerce store sells fashion clothes. What would you then ask the influencer to do? Do you send them something, or how to go about really getting started?
Yeah, it of course totally depends on the cooperation. I think it's important to let influencers do what they're best at, and that is, of course, creating content and communicating to their group of followers. So I would not per se tell them exactly what to do. Instead, you could ask them if this or that is something they could create some great content from that they are looking for their channels. And once you then start to build a bit of a closer relationship, you can ask a bit more. But I would say a key learning is that it is really important that it's always the influencers driving it. Otherwise, you sort of lose that credibility. But yeah, for us, for instance, we use it in many ways. It could be sending them merchandise or products for unboxing or product reviews. It could be doing some how-to video content. But also we've seen great uses of creativity around the use of a product to create some new and unique content. But of course, an easy one to get started would be to send samples of products, merchandise around your brands.
Okay, and then just leaving it up to them to decide what sort of content they're going to do? Yes,
and I think that's a key word, not to dictate. Unless we are talking about one of the other sort of more paid for project basis influencer setups. Otherwise, you can't really dictate, and you really need to give, as I said, you need to give the keys to the influencer themselves and make them create the content that their audience is really looking for.
Brilliant. So I was thinking, where do you want to implement your influencer marketing? Do you put it on the product pages, on the homepage, social media? Where do you then put this content? Or do you just let it be on their social media?
Yeah, I would say, again, depending on the concrete activity, but mostly I would say leaving it on the influencer's own channel. This is where, as I said, you are able to reach that broader audience, and again, an audience that might not already be yours, and hence then the audience would not necessarily be already engaging or interacting with your brand. So from a commercial perspective, the influencers channels are really where this broader mass that you're indirectly after is present. And by leaving it on their channels, it's also placed in the right context in a more credible manner. So, of course, you could also place it on your own channels, but I would say the impact or the bang for the buck is really by letting the influencers drive the distribution and posting on their channels.
Great. So do you have any ideas to creative or different influencer marketing? Because I think we see plenty of how-to videos all over the internet. So do you have any ideas as to what you can do differently, maybe?
Yes, I would say, again, leaving a bit of the creativity for the influencers. Give them sort of a challenge that you have or something that you would like them to have a think about, and let them be creative, because our belief is that they know their audience best. They know what kind of content they want to create, and hence it will be more genuine. And I think there's a lot of creativity out there. Why not, instead of hiring an expensive creative agency, reach out to 15, 20, 50 different sort of creative influencers and make them sort of work with your brand. What you would often see is really that's sort of where the magic would happen. And something that you as a brand necessarily, because you are sort of a commercial entity and you are very, in many ways, sort of tactical and commercial in your approach. So letting the consumers play around with your brand, that's often where you see some great things derived from.
Makes sense. Okay, so what tools or how do you even measure the effect of this influencer marketing?
Yeah, so first off, and it is, of course, it's an ever-evolving process of finding the right mechanics of how to. I would say what we've done so far is that we've developed sort of an internal influencer coverage report and a following database with all the relations in it. Concretely, what we would measure is how many influencers we're able to activate when, for instance, sending out an influencer or product kit for a new release of a game or something. We also measure the length of the videos, as we are mostly engaging with YouTubers. So we would see how many, what's the length of the videos, and how many social media profiles do they actually post it on. Then we also measure on how many likes, views, comments, shares, etc. And also comparing, you could say, our piece of content versus other pieces of content posted by these influencers. So is it performing better or worse than what this influencer is normally posting? And lastly, of course, do they mention our brand? What's sort of the sentiment? Is it positive, neutral, or what is it? And of course, also if they wear or show the products physically, that's another thing. So we check off. So I would say those sort of 4 things are usually how we sort of measure the effect of influencer content.
Amazing. And when do you see it as a success? When are the metrics good?
I would say where it feels natural, it feels genuine. So where the influencer has a natural interest in your product and hence talks in his sort of own tone of voice, and of course gives your product a good recommendation or something which, again, I think the engagement scores like likes and views and shares is, of course, an integral part of that. Is that something that resonates within the audiences? Is that is where you really start to see that viral effect, you could say. So, of course, that's a key metric to look at.
Great. Okay, just to really round up, how do you suggest one should nurture the relationship with the influencer afterwards?
I would say, importantly, keep them in the loop. Let them know that you're happy with the content they make. Connect with them on a frequent basis. Tell them if they're doing great stuff. Tell them that. Even if it's not your brand but they do, if they've done a great piece of content, let them know that. Involve them and do these sort of co-creations where they see a benefit, and you, of course, as a brand or a product owner, also has a benefit. And as I said, keep offering them these sort of money can't buy experiences or opportunities on an ongoing basis, because this is really something that will help them also stand out. And as I said, I think the influencer marketing is really an investment for the long run. There's no skipping corners. It's really something that you do need to do properly. You need to research. You need to firmly establish and build on the relationship with this influencer group. And then you would really start to harvest the seeds that you plant on the long run.
That's great. Thank you so much, Peter. That was amazing.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
It's a wrap. If you like this episode or the whole podcast in general, don't forget to give it a nice rating before you leave. See you next time.
This session of E-Commerce Boost was produced by Sleeknote. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on tactics and strategies that'll help boost your e-commerce.